and he couldn't take off again, and he couldn't notify the people where he'd come from that he was in trouble. So he crashed, and he had to stay on Earth. And he ended up living with what sounded like Sasquatch, Bigfoot, abominable snowman, whatever you want to call them. He ended up living with those type of creatures, and he could communicate mentally with them, but they didn't understand what he was trying to say because it was so alien to their environment. But anyway, she couldn't get away from Earth because of that. She was more or less trapped here. And that went into some other things with her lives. But these were many cases where the ships were controlled by the minds of the people flying them. And often they were wired into the machines. I had another interesting case, and this was in the latest book about a doctor who came to me. And he couldn't figure out what it was, but he said all his life he had this feeling in the pit of his stomach, like there was something there that was, it was very bad. It was something he didn't know where it came from. He didn't know what was causing it, but it was really upsetting his life. And he wanted to find out more or less where was this coming from, this uneasy feeling of that he was holding something inside and he didn't know what it was. He went to a planet where he was a killing machine. And this would have really, I think, startled him if he would have been conscious of it. But he was a machine that had been genetically a person, but he had been genetically made to be a killing machine. And he was constructed so that he was taken to these planets of the enemy, and they would search out all of the enemy they could, and they would kill them. And one way they would kill them, he would just explode with the force of like an atomic bomb. But that was the way his body was. And when he got to this planet and he began talking to me, there was such hate in his voice. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but he said he had to kill anything alive that he could find. And it was such a compulsion. It was just horrible to hear him talk like that. Search for anything that was alive, and then he would explode and blow up these people. Now, in that lifetime, when this would happen, they had a way of capturing the soul, the spirit, putting it back into another body that was also genetically engineered to be a killing machine. So this happened time and time again, many, many lifetimes. And finally, some sense began to come into that civilization. They became more spiritual, and they began to see this was not the answer. It was not solving anything by just keep killing. So at that time, they began to change their ways slowly. And then, after he died in one of these events, his soul was able to escape, and he was able to go on to other lifetimes on other planets. Well, when he came to this planet, in the life he's in now, he had a very dominating father who pushed him down and would not allow these aggressive tendencies to come out. So sometimes those type of fathers and parents have a definite purpose. But in this lifetime, he said, ever since he was a child, he had wanted to be one of two things, either a doctor or a mercenary, and he never knew where the idea of the mercenary came from. But you could see if he had been the mercenary, he would have continued the violent streak that he had had through the other lives. So instead, he became a doctor. But he's put himself in a position to where he won't be where he would hurt people if this tendency should come back. But he has changed his life around now to where he is helping people, saving them rather than killing. So you can see how the karma is being repaid. But some of lives are very strange that I've come across. But I've learned when you're doing this kind of work, you can't say, oh, that's impossible, and don't follow it up. No matter what the client says, no matter what the client is experiencing, what they are seeing, it is important to them. Even if it's not something we would believe or understand, we must follow up on it and allow them to tell their own story without trying to influence them or lead them away from what they are seeing. That is not therapy to do that, to try to push them out of what they are seeing because we don't understand it. That's when in the beginning I was offered so many things gradually that I didn't understand. I could have stopped anywhere along the line. Instead, I had to be open to the idea that anything is possible. Maybe that's why I keep getting so many strange cases. I had one woman who went to a lifetime of a very barren planet. There wasn't anything on it. And she was a man living there, and he was like a guardian. He was watching for the enemy, I guess they would call it. And they all lived underground. They had holes in the ground that they had to go down with ladders and live underground. Underground, they had an entire civilization where families and whole communities were living underground. And the only time he had to go above ground was just to watch for danger. And then as the life went on, we found out what the danger was. And they were huge machines, rather like the things you see on War of the Worlds or those type of things. They were made out of metal and they had legs and they would walk across the surface. There were also flying machines, but the most dangerous ones were these ones, that mechanical ones that had the legs. He would watch them as they walked across the surface and warn people they were coming. Because when they would find these holes, they would literally suck the people out of the holes and take them with them. In fact, it does sound a little bit like War of the Worlds, except that I got this information long before the movie ever came out, so I know it couldn't have been influenced by like that. But of course, they never knew what happened to the people. So when I got to the subconscious part, they said that there was nothing combustible on the planet, and in the cities, they had to have something that they could burn for fuel and ways to power the city. So they would use these people that they would find. I guess they considered them the lower groups, that it didn't matter if they took them or not, but they used the body in that way. It's rather kind of like that movie Soylent Green with Carlton Heston and Edward G. Robinson that was made many years ago. In that time, they were using people as food, but in this case, they were using them as fuel. So here again, makes you wonder, all this science fiction things, maybe they're not really science fiction, it's science fact, because anything is possible. And if the person can imagine these things, who knows where the idea comes from. But in my first book of Convoluted Universe, Book 1, I had a woman who went back to a lifetime where she was a mechanical person, what you might call a robot. And I kept thinking, how can a robot have a soul? But it shows that even a machine could be alive. And she had just enough of a soul that she could experience, she could feel. But of course, the makers of her and all the others didn't understand this. They treated them like machines. They didn't realize they actually had feelings that could sense things. And it finally ended to where she was finally taken apart, and then the soul was able to escape and go into another type of body. But it was because she never really appreciated the value of the human soul. She was being shown what it would be like to be a machine that no one believed had feelings. If you remember the Star Trek, you remember the movie, the Next Generation with Data, he became so human-like, and they was wanting to take him apart, and it was like, he was this machine. He had no feelings. He had to prove he was more human than they thought. That also happened in the Robin Williams movie, Bicentennial Man. This was the same thing. They didn't believe that this machine could feel, it could understand, was more human than they thought. So here again is more strange things. And we're running out of time again. But also, many of the people I've worked with have gone to where they were energy beings. They didn't need bodies. They'd gone past that point. Didn't need bodies. They didn't need structure. They were just beings of light, pure light and pure energy. And they had a lot of other things that they did in those lives. They lived in dimensions where you didn't need bodies. You were just pure energy. And you could create. You could create anything that you wanted by the sheer force of your mind. So I want people to understand this body we're in right now is just this one step of the way. There are many, many more adventures that you've had and many, many more adventures that you could have in the future. So that's what life is all about, learning lessons, trying to understand the ones we're involved in right now. Okay. All right. Next week I'm going to go live with some guests. I'm beginning to have some more guests. So next week will be the first of that. It'll be Carol Pate, who has been judged one of the best psychics in the United States. She has worked on over 500 murder cases and missing person cases. She's worked with the police, and she's an old friend of mine, and we're going to discuss some of the cases that she's involved in. She has just got through filming for her 6th edition show on the Court TV, and she's been on Unsolved Mysteries, a lot of that. So it ought to be an interesting show to let her. It's like the real-life medium that Patricia Arquette plays. This is a real-life one who has really experienced these things, and we'll be speaking about that next week. Okay, anybody that wants to contact us or find out about us, more about the books, the website is www.ozarkmountain. That's OZARKMT.com. OZARKMT.com. My 800 number is 1-800-935-0045. 1-800-935-0045. And if you want to communicate with me, the email is DECannon, CANNON, @MSN.com. Okay, good night till next time.
You have been listening to BBS Radio, a blogandservice.com production and a service to others endeavor. Thank you very much for tuning in to our radio program, and we wish you much peace and joy on your journey.